Good morning, lovelies! Today we'll be reviewing the 4-book Diviners series by Libba Bray, a historical fantasy set in 1920s America, hence the getup. I was gonna go with the flapper costume, but this is way more comfortable and I can more easily reuse this. Here on Dragons, Zombies, and Aliens, I talk about fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, as well as how to write them. So click that subscribe button and ring the bell if you haven't already, so you do not miss another video. I post on Sundays twice a month. I also have a written blog that I post twice a week at dzamarie.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. All the links are in the description. The Diviners are about a group of people with special occult abilities, and each book has them tackle a different villain or situation. In book 1, The Diviners, they have to solve the mystery of the Pentacle Killer, a guy who is murdering people in New York City and is already dead. They are literally chasing a ghost. In book 2, The Layer of Dreams, they have to solve the mystery of the sleeping sickness. People start going to sleep and they just never wake up. They get trapped in either their greatest dreams or their worst nightmares and then die like a week later. Before the Devil Breaks You, book 3 is about a haunted asylum. And finally, book 4, they go against the big villain that the entire series has been leading to, who is named the King of Crows. He's basically like this death god person thing. One thing that Bray does very well in this series is foreshadowing. A great example is with the big villain of the series, the King of Crows, who is described as the man in the stovepipe hat. If you don't know what a stovepipe hat is, Abraham Lincoln, basically. We see him in visions as early as book 1, and the whole thing is this giant mystery as to what he wants, who he is, all of these events and sightings and pentacle killers and sicknesses, they're all interconnected together, and it all leads to the King of Crows. Another thing she does very well is dramatic irony. We know from the start of book 1 who the Pentacle Killer is, even if we don't know what he wants. We know from the prologue that he's a ghost, and he's running around killing people. But none of the other characters know that. And when they do stumble upon his identity about halfway through the book, they reject it because he died 50 years ago. Who's going to be running around killing people when they died decades ago? So there's a lot of hair pulling, like, oh, you guys are so close to figuring out. No, don't, you almost had it, go back. Eventually, they do get it, but it is very tense when you see them get so close and then run off to chase another theory. Bray gives us a slow burn as the characters get closer and closer to figuring out who the King of Crows is, what he wants, and how to stop him. This is why the first 2 books deal with small, one-time villains that aren't ever seen again. It gives the characters time to figure out their powers and get some clues about the bigger picture. This also gives Bray time to properly introduce us to each individual character, and there are a lot of them. The most important ones are Evie, who can read objects, Sam, who can basically turn invisible, Memphis, a healer, his younger brother Isaiah, who can see into the future, Henry, who can walk in dreams, Lane, who can talk to the dead, and Theta, whose powers are dangerous and mysterious until right around book 3. Also, Mabel, Will, Jericho, Blind Bill, Arthur, Addie, Lillian, Elijah, Jake, Marlo, Octavia, Sister Walker, Viola, Gabriel, and many, many more. Luckily, character death is still a thing. Just as I was thinking, right around 3/4 of the way through book 3, wow, there are way too many characters in this thing. She really needs to kill some of them off. She kills off like 5 of them. Like, major plot impacting characters that have far-reaching consequences, and they're just like gone within 3 chapters of each other. So I was going into book 4 where they're facing off against the big villain that the entire series has been leading up to, like, how many of these characters are going to survive? There are a lot of pros and cons to having so many characters. One downside is that Bray tells the story in third-person omniscient. That is, when you're in everyone's heads at the same time. This can get overwhelming sometimes, but that really only happens in book 3, when all of the characters have met, they're all in the same place at the same time, working towards the same goal. So it can get a little confusing. In the other books, they're scattered in pairs and trios, and Bray mixes and matches everyone to create different groups who have to handle their obstacles in different ways. It leads to some pretty creative problem solving. Another big pro is that there is a ton of diversity in these books. It's something of a theme, actually. There are a bunch of characters of color, characters with disabilities, LGBTQIA+, and they are all major plot-impacting characters. The diversity is part of a larger theme in this series about how the story of America isn't just about one type of people. It's a huge, crazy, melting pot of 1,000 different cultures and societies. It's also really violent and oppressive if you are not a particular type of person. She gets a little preachy with this, especially in book 4, but it's a message that we all really need to hear. Think about it. When you hear 1920s America, you probably think of the start of the radio boom, the birth of movies, and all those white actors that got their start. Maybe some of the inventions we made, or, oh, that's right before the Great Depression. Stuff like the Harlem Renaissance or the anti-Chinese immigration laws, let's forget about that. Speaking of violent oppression, here's a list of trigger warnings for this series. Disassociation, sexual assault, domestic violence, racism, homophobia, graphic depictions of violence and crime scenes, domestic terrorism, and murder. Shit gets real. It's not that Bray takes this dark, depressing view of American history. We've done a lot of cool things too, and the overall message is one of hope and perseverance. But we tend to erase the less palatable parts of our history to help delude ourselves into thinking that we've always been awesome all the time. And that's just not true. People forget that we had a full-on eugenics fetish back in the day. That's racism in a lab coat, how we have to, be careful to breed out the, less pure Americans in order to have a perfect society. And it was so bad. And they appear in this book. It's part of the whole King of Crows deal. And it was literally, for me, who studies history, it was like, oh yeah, we did that. That was fun. It was not fun. Very not fun. As someone who studies history and typically struggles with reading historical fiction because of the romanticized, whitewashed tendencies, I really appreciate how Bray did her research, tackling the good, the bad, and the ugly. Another thing that she did really well with that is she handled how the America of 1927 would have reacted to people with powers. Evie, especially, is driven by the desire for fame, so she makes no secret of her abilities, and she uses it to get her own radio show. And so we see all the different reactions that all of these people have, and we also see their reaction to increased ghost sightings and the King of Crows creating more mayhem, and how some people really like the Diviners and think they're the coolest thing ever, and other people are just like, no, these guys showed up right around the same time that these ghosts showed up. There's probably a link, and there is, but what the people don't realize is that the Diviners are not what is causing the ghost problems, but they still take it out on the Diviners. It's all very on brand. What I appreciated less in this series is the romantic subplots. There are a lot of romantic subplots in this series. Too many, if you ask me, although romantic subplots are my sworn enemy. Some of these are okay. One of them centers around Ling, who is a lesbian. Yes, she gets a break because she's gay, but more to the point, she's also realizing that she is asexual in a world that doesn't have that language or community yet. So she has to figure all that out on her own while still trying to stay with the woman she loves. Ling Chang herself is also a really cool character. She's one of my favorites. She's half Chinese, half Irish. She has infantile paralysis, so she has to walk around on these crutches. There's more than one situation where they have to run from some big horrible whatever, and so someone is either pushing her in a wheelchair or just straight up carrying her. But she's also has the mind of a scientist, so while they're doing all these crazy magical things, she's analyzing it and doing experiments about it, and is all okay, how can we repeat this? How can we quantify this? What is going on? What makes this work? She's basically the strategist, the one who is kind of the leader of the group, even though she's not technically the main character. Another romantic pairing that I like is Theta and Memphis, and that's because most of the drama around their relationship is external. Part of it's very relatable. Memphis has this younger kid brother, Isaiah, They're both diviners, and Isaiah is worried that like Theta is stealing Memphis away, and it's always been the two of them, but now this girl shows up, and like he doesn't want anything to do with her, so Memphis kind of has to juggle them. So, you know, a lot of people can kind of relate to that. But there is a much bigger problem. Theta is white, Memphis is black, it's 1927. Do the math. And then there's Evie, who is involved in two love triangles. One of those love triangles between her, Jericho, and Mabel, it's okay. You know, Evie's best friend Mabel, a non-powered, basically social justice warrior, has this huge crush on Jericho, a scholar who works with the diviners. And even though Evie also likes Jericho, we see that, despite how selfish and self-centered Evie can be, she's also an extremely loyal friend. She does everything she can to get Mabel and Jericho together. That's showing Evie's character and how much she values friendship. So that's fine. And it only lasted like 1.5 books, I guess you could say. Then there's the triangle between Evie, Jericho, and Sam, which kicks off in book 2, gets very annoying in book 3 before giving a few last dying breaths in book 4. Just kill them all. There's enough characters that nobody's going to notice. Overall, I give this series 4 stars. I enjoyed it a lot, and there was more than one point where I just could not put the book down. It has some flaws, but I do not regret buying these books, and I definitely do not regret reading them. That's all I've got. Remember to subscribe to this channel and check out my social media links below for more content. And if you want early access to my videos and even more content, check me out on Patreon. The links are in the description. Bye, lovelies!